The morning mist clung to the air like a ghost, shrouding the jagged shoreline in a veil of mystery. The sky, painted in muted hues of lavender and ash, seemed to hold its breath as the tide whispered its secrets to the waiting sands. Lyra walked alone along the secluded beach, her boots crunching over weathered stones, the air brimming with a chill that kissed her cheeks. She had come seeking inspiration. For days, her sketches had been lifeless, her brushstrokes hesitant, as though her muse had abandoned her for a quieter artist. The ocean, she believed, always held the answers. Its ceaseless rhythm, the ancient pull of its tides. It was the one place where her restless mind could surrender. And it was there, in that quiet solitude, that she saw it. The shell lay half buried in the sand, its spiraled curves catching the faintest glint of dawn's light. Unlike the others strewn across the beach, it seemed untouched by time or tide. Lyra crouched, brushing away the damp sand with careful fingers, and held it up to the light. It was beautiful, almost unnaturally so. The surface gleamed with a pearlescent sheen, its spirals etched with intricate patterns that seemed to dance when the light struck them. They resembled symbols, though none that Lyra recognized. She turned it over in her hands, marveling at how warm it felt, as though the sun had kissed it despite the cold. She brought it to her ear, expecting to hear the familiar roar of the sea. But what she heard instead was a voice, soft, melodic, and layered like the ebb and flow of waves. The sound made her heart skip. It wasn't a single voice, but many. A chorus of whispers, weaving together in an ancient language she couldn't comprehend. It was hauntingly beautiful, and though she couldn't understand the words, they stirred something deep within her, a sense of longing, as though the sea itself were calling her home. Lyra gasped and pulled the shell away, her pulse quickening. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. She pressed the shell to her ear again. The whispers returned, clearer this time, though still otherworldly, as if carried on a current from another world. The heart of Oceana, lost, waiting. Her breath hitched. The words, faint and fragmented, slipped through her mind like grains of sand through her fingers. Oceana, she murmured aloud. The name felt strange on her tongue, unfamiliar yet resonant, as though she had always known it and yet forgotten. She stood, clutching the shell tightly, her gaze sweeping the horizon. The mist had thickened, the shoreline barely visible now. The waves lapped at her feet, colder than before, but she felt no urge to retreat. Instead, she stared out at the ocean, its vastness suddenly more profound, more alive. It was as though the world around her had shifted. The ordinary peeled back to reveal something deeper. The conch shell hummed faintly in her hand, its warmth soothing her chilled fingers. She turned it over again, studying the intricate patterns that seemed almost to pulse, as if alive. Lyra wasn't a believer in magic. She had spent her life grounded in the tangible, sketches, paints, the physical world she could shape with her hands. And yet, this shell, with its impossible voice and whispered name, stirred something in her she couldn't ignore. Her heart raced with questions. What was Oceana? Who or what was speaking through the shell? She looked once more at the endless expanse of water before her. It no longer felt like just an ocean. It felt like a doorway, a threshold to something vast and unknowable. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden path across the waves, Lyra tucked the shell into her coat. The whispers still echoed faintly, like a song heard from afar, calling her back to the sea. And though she didn't know why, Lyra knew she couldn't ignore that call. Something was waiting for her beneath the tides. Something ancient, something forgotten. And it had chosen her to find it. By the time Lyra returned to her cottage, the whispers in the shell had become a constant murmur, a faint melody that seemed to harmonize with the crash of the waves outside. She placed it gently on her work table, afraid to disturb its delicate mystery. The light from the single window cast long shadows, flickering over the room like restless spirits. She sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the shell. Its intricate patterns seemed to shift when she wasn't looking, as if the shell itself held a secret language etched into its spirals. A sense of unease settled over her. Not fear, but an awareness that she was holding something extraordinary. That night, Lyra dreamed of the sea. In her dream, the ocean was alive. Not just with the rush of waves or the hum of currents, but with voices. The waters shimmered with hues of deep blue and silver, and from their depths rose shapes that flickered like shadows in a storm. She heard the name again, Oceana. It rolled through her mind like thunder, and left her with a longing so profound it felt like a physical ache. When she awoke, the whispers from the shell were clearer. They no longer sounded like fragments of a forgotten song, but like words forming a language that pressed against the edges of her understanding. The heart, broken, buried. Lyra froze. She had heard these words before, faint and fragmented, but now they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She reached for her sketchbook, her hands trembling as she tried to capture what she had seen in her dream. A city beneath the sea, its towers glimmering with light and coral, a place of impossible beauty now cloaked in shadow. Each stroke of her pencil felt guided, as though her hands were no longer her own. By the time she finished, the image before her was breathtaking. A sprawling kingdom beneath the waves, its structures luminous and alive. But the center of the city was different. There, a great spire stood shattered, its base consumed by darkness. The whispers from the shell grew louder, as if urging her to listen more closely. She pressed it to her ear again, her heart pounding. Once, alive, forgotten, restore. Her breath quickened. The voice, melodic and layered, seemed to plead with her. But what was it asking her to do? How could she, a mere artist, restore something so vast and otherworldly? In the days that followed, Lyra devoted herself to unraveling the whispers. The shell spoke in fragments, like a puzzle scattered across the sands of time. She spent hours sketching and writing, her cottage filling with drawings of undersea kingdoms, symbols she didn't understand, and the haunting image of the broken spire. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she traced the patterns on the shell with her fingers, feeling their grooves as though they were alive. A sudden warmth spread through her hand, and for the first time, the voice spoke clearly. Oceana lives in the tides of belief. The heartstone must return. Lyra's chest tightened. The voice was no longer a faint echo, but a vivid presence, resonating in her mind as though it were a part of her. She closed her eyes and saw it. The heartstone, a gem of radiant light, resting in a cradle of coral. She saw hands, not her own, wrenching it free, the city darkening as the gem was swallowed by the sea. The whispers faded, leaving a heavy silence. Lyra opened her eyes, her breathing ragged. She now understood the weight of the whispers, the urgency in their plea. This wasn't just a story of a lost kingdom. This was a call to action, a burden placed upon her shoulders. The shell pulsed faintly in her hand, its glow a gentle reminder of the task ahead. Lyra didn't know how she would find this heartstone or even where to begin, but one truth was now undeniable. The ocean had chosen her. As the moonlight filtered through the window, painting her sketches in silver, Lyra felt the pull of the tide stronger than ever. The sea, vast and mysterious, held the answers she sought, and it was calling her back. The sea was restless that night, its waves rising like whispers into the starlit sky. Lyra stood at the water's edge, the conch shell warm in her hand. It had guided her here, its whispers growing insistent as dusk fell. The stars above mirrored the churning depths below, their light fractured and fleeting on the rippling waves. She waded into the cold water, the chill biting at her legs. But she did not falter. The shell vibrated faintly, its warmth steady against her palm, as though urging her forward. She could no longer tell where the whispers ended and her thoughts began. They had become one, weaving a thread of purpose through her mind. The water reached her waist when it happened. A tremor, subtle at first, rippled through the air. The sea seemed to inhale, pulling back into itself, and the world fell silent. Then, with a sudden rush, the waves surged forward, enveloping her in their embrace. Lyra's breath caught as the world around her blurred. She wasn't drowning, she was sinking. The water enveloped her, weightless yet heavy with meaning, pulling her deeper and deeper into its depths. A strange light began to bloom around her, soft and otherworldly, illuminating the sea like an endless cathedral of blue. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the mortal world. Before her stretched the ruins of a city, vast and breathtaking even in its decay. Coral-encrusted towers spiraled upward, their surfaces shimmering with faint bioluminescence. Streets paved with iridescent shells wound through the city, leading to a central plaza where the great spire she had drawn in her sketches stood shattered, its jagged edges reaching skyward like a cry of despair. This was Oceana. The whispers became louder, more distinct, and Lyra felt their presence all around her. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, moving through the ruins like phantoms. She wasn't alone. The remnants of Oceana's people lingered here, their forms faint and translucent, like echoes of a song long forgotten. One figure emerged from the shadows, her presence brighter and more defined than the others. She was beautiful, with flowing hair like seaweed kissed by moonlight and eyes that shimmered with the ocean's depths. Her voice, when she spoke, was the same as the one Lyra had heard in the shell. "Welcome, Seeker," the figure said. "I am Seraphina, guardian of Oceana. You have heard our call, and you have come." Lyra's voice faltered as she replied, I don't know why I'm here. The shell, it brought me." Seraphina nodded, her gaze heavy with sorrow. "You were chosen. Oceana's light has dimmed, its heart stolen, and its people lost to the tides of time. Only a mortal soul, pure of heart and steadfast in belief, can restore what was taken." Lyra's heart pounded. "The Heartstone. I've seen it. I've seen what it did to this place when it was taken." Seraphina's expression darkened, and the flickering lights around them dimmed. "The Heartstone is the soul of Oceana, the source of its light and life. Without it, we have become shadows, echoes of what we once were. It was stolen by a spirit born of envy, one who sought to wield its power but could not understand its cost." Lyra looked around at the ruins, her chest tightening with the weight of their tragedy. "Where is the Heartstone now?" The Guardian's gaze turned toward the horizon, where the faint outline of a trench loomed, a dark scar in the ocean's glow. "It lies in the Abyssal Rift, hidden within the lair of the one who took it. It is a place of despair, where the light of hope cannot reach. You must go there and retrieve it." Lyra swallowed hard, her pulse racing. The thought of venturing into such a place filled her with dread. But the whispers from the shell filled her mind, weaving through her fears with quiet assurance. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm just ordinary." Seraphina's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed almost mortal. "You are far from ordinary, Lyra. You possess the one thing that Oceana has lost: faith. You believe in what lies beyond the surface, in the possibility of miracles. That is what makes you worthy. The guardian extended her hand, and Lyra felt a warmth spread through her as she stepped forward to take it. The ocean has chosen you, Seraphina whispered, and it will guide you. But be warned, the journey ahead will test your courage and your heart. As the vision faded and Lyra found herself standing on the shore once more, she looked down at the shell in her hand. Its glow was brighter now, a beacon in the darkness. The tide of destiny had risen, and Lyra knew there was no turning back. The Abyssal Rift loomed before Lyra, like the mouth of some ancient beast, its jagged edges dissolving into the infinite darkness below. The waters around her were unnaturally still, the quiet so profound it pressed against her ears. Even the glow of the conch shell in her hand seemed muted here, its light flickering uneasily. She hovered at the edge, her breathing shallow as she stared into the void. The whispers from the shell had grown faint, their once soothing melody now a fragmented hum. Lyra clutched the shell tighter, her resolve wavering as fear crept into her heart. Do not falter. The voice of Seraphina echoed in her mind, clear and steady. Lyra closed her eyes, willing the guardian's strength into her veins. She had come too far to turn back. The ocean had chosen her, and though the path ahead was shrouded in shadow, she had to trust in the whispers that had brought her here. With a deep breath, she descended. The water grew colder with every stroke, the light above her fading into a pinprick, before vanishing entirely. The pressure of the deep pressed against her heavy and oppressive, yet she felt no pain. The shell's faint glow guided her, its warmth radiating through her fingertips like a lifeline. The darkness seemed alive, shifting and twisting around her, and Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Shapes moved at the edges of her vision, phantoms of the deep, their forms blurred and flickering, but they did not approach. They circled her like predators sizing up prey, their movements slow and deliberate. Then she saw it, a faint light piercing the gloom, its radiance fractured like moonlight on broken glass. The Heartstone. It rested within a massive coral structure, its surface jagged and menacing, like a cage wrought from the ocean's wrath. The gem pulsed faintly, a heart beating in defiance of its captivity. Lyra swam closer, her breath catching as the whispers from the shell grew louder, urgent. But as she reached out, the shadows around her surged. A figure emerged from the darkness, its form towering and grotesque. It was the sea spirit Seraphina had spoken of, its body a mass of writhing tendrils and gleaming scales. Eyes like black pearls bore into Lyra, and its voice rumbled through the water, a guttural growl that vibrated in her chest. Who dares trespass in my domain? Lyra's grip on the shell tightened. She felt its warmth surge, and the whispers filled her mind, weaving a shield against her fear. "I've come for the Heartstone," she said, her voice trembling but steady. The spirit's laughter was a low, menacing rumble. "You, a mere mortal, do you think you can take what I've claimed as mine? It doesn't belong to you," Lyra said, her courage growing. "You've stolen it, and because of you, Oceana's dying. Its people are lost." The spirit snarled, its tendrils thrashing. "And what is Oceana to me? They cast me out, called me unworthy. I took the Heartstone because they did not deserve it." Lyra's heart ached at the bitterness in its voice, the raw pain that fueled its anger, but she stood firm. "You don't understand its power. The Heartstone wasn't meant to be taken. It was meant to give life. Look at what your envy has done." The spirit hesitated, its form flickering. For a moment, Lyra thought she saw something human in its eyes, a flicker of doubt. But the moment passed, and it lunged, its tendrils reaching for her. The shell in Lyra's hand blazed with light, brighter than the sun piercing the ocean's depths. The spirit recoiled, its cry a guttural roar that shook the water around them. Lyra pressed forward, her path illuminated by the shell's glow. She reached the Heartstone and placed her hand upon it. It was warm, alive, its light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. As she lifted it from its coral prison, the water around her erupted in a cascade of light. The darkness vanished in an instant. The spirit shrank back, its form dissolving into the shadows. Lyra's gaze met its eyes one last time, and she saw not anger but sorrow. The Heartstone's light enveloped her, and the world dissolved into brilliance. When the light faded, Lyra found herself standing in the heart of Oceana. The city, once cloaked in shadow, now shimmered with life. Coral bloomed in radiant hues, and the broken spire stood tall once more, its surface gleaming like polished pearl. Seraphina appeared before her, her form radiant. "You have restored the Heartstone," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Oceana's light lives again, thanks to your courage." Lyra held the gem in her hands, its warmth a quiet reassurance. She had fulfilled the shell's promise, but the journey was not yet over. The whispers from the shell had ceased, but their melody lingered in her heart. And as the city came alive around her, Lyra knew that the tides of destiny had turned. The city of Oceana shimmered with newfound life, its coral towers glowing softly, as though breathing for the first time in centuries. The waters thrummed with energy, and the once muted whispers of its inhabitants had risen into a joyous chorus. Lyra stood at the base of the great spire, the Heartstone now pulsing steadily in its rightful place atop the structure. Its light cascaded across the city, refracting into the water like ribbons of gold and sapphire. Seraphina hovered nearby, her form radiant and whole, no longer the shadowy figure of despair Lyra had first encountered. "You have done what none before you could, Lyra," she said, her voice resonating with a melody that seemed woven into the ocean itself. Oceana owes you its existence, its light, its people, and its future are yours to share. The weight of her words settled over Lyra, though it did not feel like a burden. She had come here a stranger, an artist searching for inspiration, but now she felt irrevocably connected to this place. The whispers from the shell had brought her here, but it was her belief, her faith in what lay beyond the surface, that had breathed life into Oceana once more. "Will the whispers return?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet. She held the conch shell in her hands, its once radiant glow now dim. Without its whispers, she felt an unfamiliar emptiness, as though a part of her had gone silent. Seraphina's expression softened. The whispers were never meant to last forever. They were the echoes of our need, our plea for salvation. Now that the heartstone has been restored, the conch shell's purpose has been fulfilled. Its silence is not an ending, but a beginning. Lyra traced the intricate patterns on the shell's surface, their grooves now cool and still. Though its voice was gone, she could still feel its energy, a quiet hum that resonated deep within her. "Oceana will heal," Seraphina replied, her gaze steady. "The currents will carry its light once more, and its people will thrive. But the bond between your world and ours will remain. The heartstone has seen to that." "What happens now?" Lyra asked, her gaze drifting to the vibrant city around her. The merfolk, their once ghostly forms now vibrant and solid, swam through the streets, their laughter carrying through the water like music. "Oceana will heal," Seraphina replied, her gaze steady. "The currents will carry its light once more, and its people will thrive. But the bond between your world and ours will remain. The heartstone has seen to that." A gentle current swirled around them, tugging at Lyra's hair and clothing. She turned to face the open sea, where the faint outline of the surface shimmered far above. The pull was unmistakable. Oceana was releasing her, returning her to the world she had come from. "Will I ever see this place again?" Lyra asked, her voice catching. Seraphina stepped closer, her luminous form radiating warmth. "The ocean does not forget those who listen to its call. You will always carry Oceana with you, in your heart and your art. And should you ever need us, the tide will bring you back." The words wrapped around Lyra like a promise, binding her to this place in a way she couldn't fully understand, but instinctively trusted. As the current grew stronger, Lyra felt herself rising, the water carrying her upward like a gentle embrace. The city below faded into a blur of light and colour, its beauty etched into her memory. She clutched the conch shell tightly, its cool surface a reminder of all she had seen and done. When she broke through the surface, the sun was rising, casting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. Lyra floated on the gentle waves, the shell still warm against her chest. The ocean was silent now, save for the rhythmic lapping of the tide. But it was a silence filled with peace, not loss, a stillness that carried the weight of miracles. In the weeks that followed, Lyra returned to her art with a newfound fervour. Her sketches and paintings came alive with the colours of Oceana, each piece resonating with the light she had seen in its depths. Her work drew attention from those who saw it, and though she could never fully explain the inspiration behind it, she felt no need to. The conch shell rested on a shelf in her studio, its glow now faint but steady. Sometimes, when the night was quiet and the world was still, Lyra thought she heard the faintest whisper from its depths, a melody, a promise, a reminder of all that lay beneath the surface. And though she would never again hear the voices as she once had, she knew they were there, carried on the tide, woven into the rhythm of the sea. Oceana had been restored, its light shining once more. But it was not just the city that had been saved. Lyra too had been changed, her heart forever bound to the whispers of the ocean and the miracle of belief. The tides had turned, and in their embrace, Lyra found her place.